Welcome to Turn Talks, the podcast that bridges the gaps between college and career. Join your host, Tina Fox, founder of Turn Mentoring, as she brings together corporate leaders, educators, and university alumni to share practical wisdom and equip you with confidence, clarity, and connection.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turn Talks, where we explore the real stories behind mentorship, career pivots, and the courage it takes to expand your identity beyond just one chapter of your life. Today, I am talking with none other than the Dr. Josh Angulo. He is a former multi-sport high school athlete and collegiate football player who has built a business around performance, recovery, and truly meeting people where they are. Josh is the founder and CEO of Optimum Wellness, the DMV's mobile chiropractic practice that literally brings high-level musculoskeletal care to your home office or training facility. His work focuses on helping people maximize their performance and stay healthy enough to do what they love, whether that's being a weekend warrior or competing at the highest level. As a sports-focused chiropractor, he's worked with professional athletes here in the DC area, including serving as team chiropractor for the DC United, NWSL's Washington Spirit, supporting the U.S. women's national team, Go Girls, and treating players with the Washington Commanders during the preseason. Josh, it is awesome to have you on our podcast. Welcome to Turn Talks. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina. This is super stoked to be on this with you. I'm excited to get into some of this with you. It's going to be fun.
Great. So some people may not know, you're actually also my personal chiropractor. I am not an elite athlete. However, I do tend to injure myself way too much. And so I was so lucky to meet you. And in all of our friendly discussions about just taking care of ourselves, I learned a lot about your history. And being a fellow entrepreneur, I was also interested in how you as a student athlete managed to not just take, I guess, yourself away from just the athletic part, but move yourself into a career path that does involve athletes for sure. But you've carved out your own identity in that. So I want to go backwards a little bit to set the time frame and the audience's mindset. So can you take us back to the days that you were a student athlete? You know, what did that look like for you then? How would you have described your identity as a young Josh Angulo?
Well, boy. So I mean, as far as describing the identity, I think most student athletes would probably admit to what I'm going to say next, but I think everybody, when you're in that phase of life, especially when you're at a higher, not higher necessarily, but if you're at a Division I, Division II school where it's a really competitive program that you're in, you view yourself more, at least I did, as an athlete that's also a student. And I know the saying is always, you're a student athlete first, you're the student comes first. But when you're 19, 20 years old and all you're doing every single day is breathe, sleep, do it again over and over and over your sport, it really does kind of start to become where you in your mind view yourself sometimes as the athlete first. And I don't know if everybody would admit to that, but I certainly thought that, especially for the first few years of college. You go through the recruitment phase from high school going into college, and there's so much talk and hype around you becoming an athlete at the next level. There's not a lot of people that get to do that. So your attention really gets drawn into that. And so it definitely is challenging as a student athlete to make sure that you are keeping the studies and your academics, focused. And so going back to me as a younger age, I definitely was 110% committed to being an athlete. And then I'd say, and my my advisor from college might also agree, but I was definitely not as focused on my studies as I probably should have been for the first, year and a half. But eventually you kind of do come to figure out like, okay, this is obviously important. This is going to propel me for the rest of my life. So I think going back and what would I say I was like then? Somebody who was hyper focused on being the best athlete that they could be. And I didn't become that way with my studies until a little bit later down that path. But everybody learns and goes through those experiences. But I was super focused on doing what I needed to do to perform at the highest level. And I think my teammates and everybody, even my, teachers through that part of my academic career would attest to that as well. I mean, you're showing up after a 6 a.m. workout to class and you're still in your sweaty clothes. It's like, wow, you're at an 8 a.m. lecture and you've already worked out for 2 hours. It's a big commitment.
I was just going to say, I would assume, and now I was not an athlete, but I know a lot of athletes, and in viewing their lives, it's very obvious that whether it's the family unit whether it's their professors, as you said, or their teachers, certainly their coaches, many of the friends that they hang out with. Everybody is in this space of, cheering on the athlete, because who doesn't like a good competitive game, and who doesn't like somebody who's excelling in that game? So I can see a lot of emphasis being placed and a lot of praise being placed on that. And if we're all in it for the dopamine hit, then that praise is going to come in real nice when it comes to performing as an athlete. Now, at what point did you feel like there was even this like small little whisper in the back of your head that said, I don't know, I've been doing this athlete thing a long time. I love it, but do I see myself becoming semi-pro, pro? When did that whisper finally say, I think I need to think about what's next?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I would say during my athletic career, it was probably in that transition from my sophomore to my junior athletic season. I actually did a redshirt year, my true freshman year. So that technically was like my junior academic year, but it was only my sophomore to junior transition year of sports. But I would say at that point, it wasn't that. I'm going to be honest. I don't think I ever thought that I wasn't going to be able to play professionally. You always like are holding that. You're like, maybe it can still happen. Maybe you can achieve that dream that you've had since you were a kid. But I will say that time, that sophomore to junior year transition, was when I said to myself, okay, I'm still going to give this pro sports thing everything I can give, but I want to make sure that if it doesn't work out, that I'm prepared for whatever I need to do next. I would say for me, that's when that kind of thought came into my head, where I actually took that seriously. You have your parent. I was lucky to have, a great family structure in my life. And so my parents were always telling me that. But I think for a while, as you probably know, having teenagers, you don't always want to listen to what your parents are telling you. And that sophomore to junior year was when I really kind of buckled down, started to take my studies a lot more serious, and just knew that I had to be prepared for, if I didn't play professionally, then what was I going to do next?
So was that scary? Like, how did you feel, even though there was that recognition and you were still gunning for pro, but you're like, I need a backup plan? Was that just planning, or was that nerves? What was that feeling that you were having during that time?
That's a good question to ask that. Yeah, it's a good question to ask, how that felt. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question before. I think, if I'm being honest with you, I feel like I think maybe part of the reason why I didn't want to think that way for a while was because you almost, as a competitor and in athletics, it's almost like you're hyper focused on the goal, and anything outside of that goal is like you're almost cheating on that goal, or that you're not focused enough, or that you're thinking that there could be another outcome. And so for me, I think a lot of it was I didn't want to give that a thought, because I didn't want to feel like I was quitting on my original goal, which was to play a professional sport. So I think the feelings of that are, you're like, I don't know if I want to think about any other options, because I don't want to create that or manifest that into reality, because that's not what I really wanted to happen. I wanted to play professionally. But I think once you get over that hurdle, I think once I got over that mental hurdle, I think it was just like, yeah, this is what I need to do. Like, I need to make sure that I'm prepared. And it took me a while, I think, to maybe mature and realize that that's not a bad thing, to be prepared for multiple outcomes. Obviously, now as a business owner, I understand that that's kind of what every single day is like. But when you're going through that for the first time, it's definitely an interesting feeling. And I think you maybe even feel like it makes you sometimes maybe even feel insecure about yourself as an athlete. You're like, am I really good enough to be playing? Like, should I be quitting on this goal? Should I not? But then eventually you kind of realize, you have to plan. You have to be prepared. You have to have multiple outcomes that you can be able to handle and be prepared for, just like I would in competition. If I played wide receiver in college. So if I saw one coverage, I knew what I had to do. If I saw another coverage, I knew what I had to do. And it's the same thing in life, but it takes, a young kid sometimes a little while to figure that out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's great that you had support and that you were clear of mind in that space. So you mentioned this transition. So now we're going from athlete, and we're in college and we're playing football and we're thinking about this career afterwards. So everybody starts with a consideration of a major. Lord knows I switched mine after failing a class. However, what were some of those first career paths that you seriously considered when you realized, okay, I need this plan B, because maybe the sport thing isn't going to last forever? What were some of those early paths?
Yeah, sure. I'd say the early paths, it's going to sound cliche, but believe it or not, my original major when I got to college was chiropractic studies. That's what I originally wanted to go into. And the reason was I had a really bad injury going a couple of injuries going through college, and the sports chiropractor that I had and utilized growing up helped me immensely. And I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. And that was a big reason for me wanting to even get into the profession, in the first place. But believe it or not, that was my initial major. And then around my sophomore to junior year, I started doing a lot better with my studies, and I was really doing well in a lot of these science courses. And I thought for a while, maybe I'd want to go to medical school. I actually did sit for the MCAT once I had graduated from college, and then actually, obviously, ended up going to chiropractic school instead. But yeah, that was my initial ambition, was just because of my own personal experiences to get into it.
That's great. Well, it sounds like there could have been like a silent mentor in that whole experience, because somebody was helping you through injury and you were so taken with that it put you on that mental path of, maybe I could be that for these folks. It wasn't too much of a departure, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say even it was just like a good role model to see, like, hey, this is, we're going to talk about this later in the role of the mentor, obviously, but it was just an obvious moment where I said, hey, that's really cool. And it was like an inspirational thing for me to say, hey, you know what, this is cool. I could see myself doing that.
Do you remember their name?
Yeah. Dr. Ross McDaniel still practices in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So shout out Dr. Ross in Chirosport. I know them very well. We were really close family friends. And me and Dr. Ross actually have stayed in touch. He's an excellent guy. He's been a great, kind of to your point, silent mentor, somebody who I really value their opinion.
That's great. Well, thank you, Dr. Ross. I'm very happy because I get fixed because Dr. Josh is in this.
There
in
you
this
go.
role.
Look at that.
So unlike many people who have to like dabble a little bit, like fail and then dabble a little bit more, you had this path, you started going down this path. You do have that mindset, right? That athletic mindset where it's like, there's the goal, there's the place I need to be, and you just go for it. So when you decided on sports chiropractic, which is what you're doing now, why specifically that instead of more general chiropractic? Is it because you were an athlete, or you just saw that niche was like your niche, you got it?
So totally. I think it's complete. I mean, my whole life essentially revolved around sports. So I was constantly doing sports. I grew up playing hockey when my family lived in Minnesota. Then that transitioned into football. I played tennis, volleyball, basketball. I mean, you name it, I was playing it. So my whole life revolved around sports. And then once I figured out that I could do a profession that, also part of it as well is that I was really fascinated with like human performance and like training. When you're playing football at that level, you're constantly training. So I kind of naturally had an interest in learning how to do that at the best of my abilities and train. And so that was, to me, it felt like sports chiropractic was the perfect blend of like helping people and seeing the way that I was helped, but then also incorporating a lot of like those special skills of human performance and how can everybody get, the most out of their potential. That was the perfect marriage for me.
That's awesome. So Optimum Wellness was born.
It was.
And Optimum Wellness is not just chiropractic care. We're talking about a mobile concierge style practice. And you literally go to people's homes. You come to my home, you go to the gyms, you go to workplaces. Now, where did this idea come from?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say the idea came from kind of observing the landscape of medical care that we currently have. The mobile idea has been out there. We're certainly not the first people to offer that service. Most clinics, when we were doing kind of our market research, most clinics that do offer mobile care, they have a brick and mortar space on top of it. And they kind of offer that as an adjunct to like an additional therapy that you can pay an extra fee for if you need a house call. But it didn't really seem like anybody was really going for it and trying to do this mobile, service that we do now. And so we noticed that there was maybe an opportunity in the market for it. But then also my wife and I, Dr. Kara Ziemer, we wanted to create this practice because we wanted to also have a little bit more control over the amount of time we could spend with the clients. And so by offering this, you eliminate a lot of, we eliminate a lot of patient excuses as far as, oh, I can't get there today. I can't do this. I can't do that. There's a lot more accountability also with our clients when we're going to their home and we're like, hey, did you do X, Y, and Z? Have you been able to perform this part of the treatment plan? Because we're sitting in their living room, we're sitting in their dining room, wherever we're doing this treatment. And it creates a little bit more sense of accountability. And so for that reason, we were like, hey, this mobile concept could work. We do 60-minute appointments and 30-minute appointments, which a 60-minute appointment in the chiropractic profession is almost unheard of, but it allows us to really get the level of care that we want to provide to our clients. And so that's where that concept came from.
Yeah, I think so. You don't just work with athletes, obviously, because you work with me. So, what do you think is the difference between working with an athlete versus a non, or is there?
No, yeah, that's a good question. I think the only difference is in the perception of the person that I'm working on. So, for instance, that's funny that you said, I'm not an athlete. I would beg to differ. I think that everybody is an athlete depending on how you view yourself and what your tasks of daily living are. The reality is everybody needs to be able to squat, everybody needs to be able to sit down, stand up, everybody needs to be able to do these basic movements. And whether you're doing them out on a football field with like a million people watching on TV, or whether you're just at home, whether you're picking up laundry baskets, like it doesn't really matter what you're doing. The movements and the principles of the anatomy and the biomechanics of all these movements are all the same. So for me, I don't view it any different. And I think actually what I've found in working with people who would describe themselves as non-athletes is that they like working with doctors who work with athletes because it makes them feel like they're working with somebody who really understands the full picture, who understands how the body's supposed to be working. And it's something that the clients that, again, say they're non-athletes, not that I agree with them, I think they enjoy that part, that they know that we're kind of looking at them through an athletic lens and that we view them as athletes. And I joke with all my clients, like, I want you moving. I want you doing what you need to do. Like, I don't want you being stagnant. I want you to have all the movement skills and capacities that you need to be able to perform whatever you want to do on a daily basis.
All right. So, Josh, you have gone from student athlete to working in the field of chiropractic care. And then you had this moment, but you haven't described the moment yet, as to when you decided that you were not going to just be a clinician and working for someone else, but you started switching that mindset to, I'm going to be a founder and a CEO. And this became even, I guess, before the mobile idea, or did those two come in tandem? And how did those mindset shifts occur for you, to go through these different phases? How did you become a founder CEO?
Yeah, I think how I think it really happened was I was working at another clinic right out of chiropractic school. I had been working there for about a year and a half, and throughout that process, it's like, hey, I think it happens with everybody. You go through a work experience, and you're like, certain things I like, certain things I don't like, and what can I how could I improve this perhaps? And so, as we already talked about with the concept of mobile care and concierge care, that kind of idea had already been established in our minds. Then we said to ourselves, my wife and I said, okay, how can we do you think we could do this on our own? It was just kind of like a natural question that we kind of asked ourselves. And then again, kind of alluding to the fact of being a student athlete, honestly, I felt like at that moment when we had the concept of, okay, we have this idea, do we think we can perform it and actually do it? I really felt like I tapped back into that part of my mind where I was an athlete, and it took, I mean, it's definitely not easy, as you know. It takes extreme focus, extreme dedication, extreme hard work, which was a lot of the same type of stuff that I had to do to be an athlete in college, also to get through graduate school. I mean, it takes a ton of hard work and dedication and focus to be able to get to this point and to be able to be, a CEO founder and have a company that's operating successfully. And so I really felt like that experience as an athlete helped me once I got to the phase of asking myself that question, like, am I gonna really do this? And then we did a ton of research, a lot of market research, a lot of time spent business planning and modeling and projecting. And then once we sat down and said, okay, this is actually possible. In my mind, really the question that at the moment was when we had it all laid out there, I said to my wife, okay, if I'm going to bet on anybody to like do anything in life, am I going to bet on myself or not? Like, am I willing to, pull the trigger and basically say, can I do this or not do this? And without question, I give my wife a lot of credit. She was like, I mean, if you believe in this, then I know it's going to work. So do you believe in it? That was her exact response. And I said, yeah, I believe in it. So let's go. And then thanks to my wife, obviously, for her support, means more than anything. But she said that, and that was kind of it. And then from that point, the snowball kind of started rolling down the hill. And now here we are almost 3 years later, 3 years almost to like a month away exactly from being 3 years of being open.
Wow. And we love Dr. Kara too. She is absolutely amazing. To be able to go into business with not only a partner, but a partner who happens to be your spouse can be very difficult. But when you have the same plan and some of the same goals in what you want to accomplish, and you guys decide that you're going to burn the boats together, that's pretty powerful. So
yeah, it was pretty cool.
It's a great duo. So talk to me about some of those things you mentioned, that being an athlete helped you in certain instances as far as the mindset. So if you had to talk to students today, or maybe just the younger Josh Angulo about, hey, this skill right here, I'm now, years out, and I can see how this skill is being applied to me as not only a business owner, but somebody who is working alongside other athletes. What are some of those skills that you think you bring forward?
Yeah, a couple of really big ones. I think number one, when you're a student athlete, student athletes, and this is kind of what started this discussion actually and brought the idea of doing this podcast up together. But student athletes, when they're in school, in my opinion, they get a lot of flack from non-student athletes. People like to, throw jabs at them and say that they have it made because they get to do certain things that other student athletes don't get to do. And they get a lot of jokes about that. And that also carries on into your post student athlete life. You get a lot of jokes and stuff like that about being a student athlete and whatever, stigmas come with that. But to me, undoubtedly, when you're a student athlete, you are doing all the academic work. And on top of that, you're working like more than full-time hours on your actual sport. At least that's how it was for us in the football program that I was in. I mean, you're talking practice during the season is starting at, I think we used to start around like 3:00. That means pre-practice is starting at 2:30, 2:45. That means you got to be in the training room by 2. That means you got to be at the facility by like 1, because you have several meetings. You have a team meeting, you have a position meeting, you have special teams meetings. And then on top of that, you got to get your lift in still during that day. There's 3 different lifting groups. So you're lifting at 6 a.m. or at like 12 p.m. before the team meet. So this is just off the top of my memory about all the things. And then you have post-practice meetings. And then on top of that, you're getting home after all these post-practice meetings, the film, everything you're going over. You get home around 6 or 7. That's like early. And then you got to still do all your academic work on top of that. So the reason why I'm pointing all that out is, you got to be able to deal with stuff when you're tired. And I think,
yeah, I'm exhausted listening to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I view that as a skill. I don't know if everybody does, but I think, you got to be able to do stuff when you're tired and being able to perform. And that's how it is on the field or the court or whatever sport you're playing. When you start to get tired, your opponent doesn't like start trying less because you're tired. They actually pick it up harder if they see that you're tired. We used to have a rule at my program at USF where when we were doing conditioning drills or anything on the field at any point, you were never allowed to lean forward and put your hands on your knees like you're resting. That was literally not allowed. You would have to immediately start doing up downs if you were seen doing that. And I hated that when I was an athlete because it sucks because you're exhausted and you want to just lean forward and rest. But I think the mindset of that is really powerful. And it's like, don't let anybody see that you're tired. And even when you are tired, pick up the slack and keep going. And the most important thing is when you push through those moments of extreme fatigue, or I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this, or, this is too much or it's too challenging. Whenever you push through, there's always a moment where you actually do have time to rest and you can take your time and you can recoup your batteries. And that stuff's important too. But I think that you need to be able to perform when you're tired and not feel sorry for yourself sometimes and just push through and have the discipline and the perseverance to fight through that stuff. And when you can, I think what you gain as an athlete, not everybody has that experience. Some people have that ability, naturally, which I think is good for them. I definitely was not one of those types. It took that experience for me as an athlete, to learn those skills. And then also recognize that when you get out into the professional world, it's the same. It's the same. I don't have defensive backs trying to press me off the line anymore, but I have a lot of other problems when I have a business like I do now that are presenting themselves and trying to, create problems for me. And how are you going to figure out how to manage that, do those things when you're tired? It's, not to mention all the personal life stuff that happens. And not, me and my wife don't have a family yet, but maybe someday. But there's more and more stress that is bound to come. So that ability to be able to push through and to persevere, that to me is by far the biggest skill that you learn as an athlete.
So that's amazing, because absolutely the physical training that you had to leak over into the mental training to just get through that. And there's a podcaster that I've listened to for a long time. His name is Ed Milet, and he calls it separation season. So as you were talking about, the fact that you can't rest on your laurels because your competition's not resting on their laurels, that is separation season, right? It's being willing to do that little bit of extra that
Yeah.
other people are not in the times where you're the most tired.
Yeah.
And that's what pushes you forward. So yeah, I can absolutely see that being a huge skill that you bring forward as a founder CEO, because every day as an entrepreneur sometimes can feel like a kick in the head, right?
Oh
So
my gosh. A kick in a lot of places. Yeah.
you
A couple
gotta
of,
keep going.
yep. Got to keep pushing.
So let's talk about some of your mentors. We talked about one of your mentors who you saw, working as a chiropractor on athletes, working on you. You still keep in touch with him to this day. Who were other key mentors during your transition from college athlete to now graduate and moving into, entrepreneurship? Who were some of those folks?
Yeah, those are great. That's a great question. Well, the first person, undoubtedly, I wouldn't have gone to college without this person and played football in college without this person. But my high school football coach, his name's Kim Nelson. He's still in Sioux Falls to this day, the town that I grew up in. He was a huge influence on my life and my ability to play football, and he taught me so much about football at a young age that I had no clue. I just thought I was out there. I thought I knew what I was doing. Absolutely had no clue what I was doing until he started coaching me up. And him and his sons, Ross and Joey, they were huge influences on my life. And because of what they taught me, I was able to play. You're looking at a pretty slow, non-athletic guy, and they taught me how to run routes and how to get open. And so God bless them for teaching me what to do out there. So that's the first one for sure. I wouldn't have gotten to college without that. My advisor, who I think I introduced you to, Dr. Schultz, she was a huge help for me when I was in college. She was kind of that like little nudge in the back of my shoulder that was like, hey, make sure that you're still showing up to bio at 8 a.m. on Tuesdays. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, But you know how that goes when you're a 19-year-old. But she was a great influence on me. She helped nudge me and constantly kind of push me a little bit. And what I loved about her as an advisor was that she knew I was an athlete, and sometimes she would talk to me like an athlete. I'd walk into her office and she'd go, Josh, what the hell are you doing? Why are you skipping your class? Like, geez, you're being such an idiot. I'm like, you're right, Dr. Schultz. So I really appreciate that from her. And that she had, the guts to talk to me like that, because sometimes you need a little butt kicking. You're like, you know what? She's right.
She's very authentic, and you're right. You did introduce me to her, and I distinctly remember when I met her. It was so funny because she was like, yeah, so, Josh is doing pretty well, huh? And it was almost like one of those things where she was so happy and proud for you. But at the same time, I think she was thinking of the younger Josh going,
oh, for sure.
Sometimes this kid didn't show up for class.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. But it was great that all these years later, you're like, hey, I got to introduce you to Dr. Schultz because she's such a game changer in my life.
Yeah. She would say I was one of her biggest like side aches. So it was, I definitely needed her encouragement. So thanks, Dr. Schultz. And then in that transition from undergrad to chiropractic school, one of my biggest mentors was Dr. David Farrar, who ironically enough actually works with our company now. He actually just moved out here to the DMV a few months back, and now we work together. He was the head of the anatomy department while I was in my doctorate degree there at Northwestern Health Sciences in Minneapolis. And him and I became really close. I actually became one of his teaching assistants right after I finished taking, how it works in our program was you take gross anatomy 1, then you take gross anatomy 2. And then sometimes if you did well in those courses, the professors would ask you if you wanted to be a TA, which was fantastic for me because I needed money. I was a broke grad school student. So I was like, I need some money. So this works. And on top of that, I get to stay studying. I get to help, new students learn. And it helped me, keep my mind sharp and keep all those things that I learned in that coursework fresh in my mind. So that was a no-brainer. And then through that time, him and I developed a really great friendship and mentorship. And he's been a huge influence on my career, and a lot of the way that I practice still to this day is some of the stuff that he taught me when I was, a trimester 1 student at Northwestern.
That's awesome. So you're working with patients, you're working with athletes. They look at you. I look at you as a trusted guide. How do you think your mentors influence the way that you show up for people and you serve them on a daily basis?
Oof, that's a good question. I think for sure the mentor that I just spoke of, Dr. Dave, Dr. Davey Farrar, he showed me he influenced me a lot. And I think the biggest way that he influenced me was in having like a strong sense of empathy towards the patients that you're working with. Unfortunately, I think in the medical system that we have in America, there's a lot of emphasis on volume and a lot of emphasis on seeing more patients being as productive as possible, no matter what part of the medical field that you're in, whether you're a chiro, whether you're a primary care physician, whether you're a orthopedic surgeon, whether, whatever it is, there's a lot of emphasis on volume. A lot of that has to do with the insurance situation in this country and how those networks are developed and set up. And that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But what I really learned from him was, having empathy and understanding that there's a human being in front of you. And if the human being in front of you is dealing with something emotionally, that emotional situation that they're dealing with 100% of the time will manifest itself in the body in some way. And if you go into, if I go into an hour appointment and I can tell that something is off with my patient, emotionally, just in how they're communicating with me, I would say the biggest thing that I do as a practitioner is you're constantly reading people. I'm reading your emotions. I'm reading the micro expressions on your face. As I'm speaking through what we're going to do for the appointment, if I'm seeing that there's something wrong on your face, I will stop the appointment immediately and say to you, hey, everything okay? Are you dealing with something right now that's bothering you? Forget the glute bridges that I taught you to do. Forget all the drill. Like, that stuff is irrelevant if you're dealing with something inside that's really, bothering you and is really affecting you. It 100% will affect the appointment. I've had that happen to me so many times, where you bring something like that up and I notice that there's something wrong. And I say to the client, hey, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden the client's in tears. They're telling you something that happened and they're being really vulnerable and they're opening up with you. And that's a really, really beautiful thing that people have the faith to say that to me and to open up that way. But what I notice and what the most beautiful part about it is that when those moments happen, if somebody does break down and they're having a bad day or they're having some sort of emotion, as soon as they get that out of them, it's like everything is just cleared and they're all of a sudden they're like, so tell me about the football game, they start and their whole demeanor changes. And once that happens, then I know we're ready to start doing some actual work. But I think that whole process in investing the time, and that's why I love what we do, why we have 60 minutes, because in a 10-minute appointment, I don't have time to really give a crap about what emotions are going on in your life right now, because I have to go right now. I have to go fast because I have 4 other patients in the waiting room waiting for you. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I learned from any mentor, and Dr. Dave taught me that, just to be empathetic.
So what you've said about the mental health of your patients and you being able to not only read the body, which as an athlete, you're probably reading, body language all the time so that to move left, move right, advance, stay put, is so important. Another one of those skills we were talking about that you took from being an athlete and moved into this career as a chiropractor. But on college campuses today, there's a lot with mental wellness that we are trying to tackle, because as wonderful as technology is, it can separate people in their ability to communicate. And it can also separate people in their ability to see those very small nuances when you are face to face with an individual. If you're out of practice, if you're always looking at a screen, you're probably missing those minute movements in people. And that's something that you obviously are very adept at. So when it comes to that, what would you say as far as mental wellness, and, what advice would you give to someone if they're physically feeling something in their body? What should they be checking, beyond going to the chiropractor first? Maybe that's not their first line of defense. Maybe that's not their first thought. What would you advise them?
Sure. I think the biggest thing for anybody who's dealing with any sort of, whether it's just stress of life, whether you're going through personal losses or grieving about something or whatever the stressor, may be, I think everybody needs to figure out whatever physical way they can do something to try to physically de-stress themselves. That I think is probably the biggest piece of advice I could give you. The literature on this is pretty strong. Like, when you're dealing with stress, when you've got high cortisol levels, you need to physically dump that. You need to try to get some of that out of your system. So any sort of way to do physical exercise is the way. Whether you're somebody who loves to go on a walk, whether you're somebody who loves to get on a Peloton, whether you want to play tennis, whether you're a pickleball person, whatever the physical manifestation that you choose, whatever outlet you want, you got to try to do something physical to try to get some of that stress out of you and have fun. Like, pick something that's fun. If you like playing volleyball, go play volleyball for 30, 45 minutes, hour, whatever, but go have fun. Go do something physical, get your blood flowing a little bit. And I guarantee you that that's going to help take some of the edge off of that stress that you're dealing with. And sometimes where people get in trouble is they think, oh, I'm dealing with this or that, and I just feel sad, and I just want to sit on my couch and feel sad. Well, that's actually the worst thing that you could do. You need to get up, you need to move, you need to try to be active. Going back to talking about that mental discipline and fortitude to push through. When you're going through those things, the best thing you can do is try to get active. So I would say that's the best thing that you could do for yourself if you're dealing with any sort of situation. Physical fitness and physical movement isn't going to fix everything in life, but it's the evidence is pretty clear that it's going to help you if you're dealing with a lot of stress.
Rolling stone gathers no moss, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So not only do we deal with mental wellness on campuses, but there's another big thing that we study here at Turn Mentoring, and that has to do with the imposter syndrome. Cool. So you are somebody who works with incredibly high level athletes here in the DC region. We talked about the fact that you work with the Washington Spirit, that you've helped the U.S. women's national team, and even the Washington Commander players. So what is it like to step into those environments as the chiropractor to support people in their wellness?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I think this is how I would describe it. The imposter syndrome thing is funny because I think a lot of people feel that way. Whatever their field is, when you get to close to those opportunities where you're like, hey, this is the highest level of my field, whether you're an architect, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a designer, in my instance, I'm a chiropractor. But I think when you get to those opportunities, I think about it how I thought about athletics. Like I've prepared myself for this moment. I've spent, when you go through your chiropractic degree, spent basically 3.5 years nonstop studying and practicing and technician over and over and repetition and over and constantly over. Like it's so much repetition and so much coursework in such a short amount of time that I think maybe that's a part of what I learned as an athlete. But when those opportunities present themselves, I just think to myself, you know what? I've done everything that I could possibly do to be prepared for this. And I think that I'm ready. And maybe that's blindness on my part maybe it's arrogance. But I think to myself, I've prepared a lot. I've spent a lot of time getting ready for this, and I'm going to do the best that I can do. And I think on top of that, having the attitude of saying, you know what, I'm going to do the best that I can do. But every time I try to work with pro athletes, I always say like, hey, how are you doing? How do you feel? Do you feel like this helped you? Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially when you're in a team environment, like working with the Spirit. It's been phenomenal. There's a lot of medical professionals in that building, all working together. And so communication is critical, making sure that, you're administering the care that you can give at the best of your abilities, but also making sure that you're communicating with the athlete, you're communicating with the other medical staff to make sure, hey, is this the treatment that you guys wanted? Is this, what do you think about this and this? Spitballing ideas with them and communicating with them is critical. But to address the imposter syndrome, I would say just trust yourself. I mean, if you're in a position like in my field, if you're in a position to be even like an athlete is wanting to work with you or you're getting close to that, for me, that was like the pinnacle of what I wanted to do. I'd been prepping for that basically since I was 20 years old. Like I'd been preparing myself for that moment, And so in my mind, I said, you know what, just go for it. Have fun. Like, don't be afraid. Just do what you think is right. Communicate appropriately. And that's kind of how it all started.
So I think great advice on that. You obviously, is somebody who goes in, you prepare early and often. And so you feel good, even if it's a high stress environment where imposter syndrome could leak in for other people. You're like, all right, I'm here. I might as well make the most of it. I've prepared for this. I'm doing this. Yeah. And there's like a no fear attitude in that. So now I'm going to flip the switch. So where have you shown up and you're like, wow, did I royally mess that up? Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, sure. I think sometimes the times where I think I've messed up in my career is, at least for me as a provider, it's critical that you have systems in place, mental systems. And so what I mean by that is when you're working with a client, whether it's a pro athlete or whether it's a non-athlete, it doesn't even matter who it is. You have to stay diligent into your systems. And this is something that I learned from one of my mentors, actually, Dr. Tim Stark, who was also at Northwestern, where I got my degree from. But systems are critical. And so the mistakes that I have made in my career is when I deviated from the system. So I'll give you an example. When I do a new patient intake or new patient exam, I'm following in my mind a very set system in rhythmic flow that I want to follow to make sure that I'm not missing anything. When you go through medical school or go through chiropractic degree program, one of the classes that you take is how to do a proper intake. Like, how do you do a full history, a full medical background, a full, and as you become a provider and you get more experience, you kind of nuance that and make it fit, what you do. But for
Mhm.
me, those instances where I made mistakes, whether it was a misdiagnosis or whether it was, shoot, I don't think I should have administered that treatment necessarily in that spot. I should have done it over here. Anytime that has happened, it's because I've deviated from that. So I think that that's probably the biggest takeaway is like, again, going part of it, I think, is imposter syndrome related, but find your system, stick to it, believe in your system, don't deviate from that. And then when you figure out what your system is and what kind of, dogma you're going to be following, do it and stick to it and don't deviate. Even if you're like, you know what, this seems like the most simple case of idiopathic low back pain, doesn't matter, still follow the system, still do what you got to do. And if you do that, you're probably going to avoid a lot of those fudge ups that I had in my career.
All right, but I still have to go back. So you have to give us one of those fudge ups. You have to tell us
God.
like what
Okay.
was it specifically, and then how did you talk yourself through that, get over it, and still end up here today? Because that is what a lot of
Sure.
students they get a lot out of our failures more than they get out of our successes. Although I am a big believer in the processes because processes help take ambiguity out of things. So that's a great tip. But you got to give us one of the fudge ups, and you got
Okay.
to
Can it
tell
be
us
a
how to
bit?
get
Can
it.
it be a business fudge up? Because I have one that popped.
Yeah, man, anything you want.
All right, all right. So I'd say the biggest fudge up so far, when you're starting a business, a lot of people are approaching you and trying to offer you help to help you grow your business, whether it's marketing, whether it's accounting services, I mean, there's a bajillion avenues on things that you need as a business owner for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that are trying to, like, hey, you should try this. You should try this. You should try direct mail marketing. You should try this. And the marketing part of it, in my opinion, was the biggest like question mark of, okay, I'm a new business owner. How much do I invest into this? What do I want to do? Da 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 da. And I think the biggest mistake that I made was, at least for my business, was not recognizing that my business is extremely interpersonal and extremely focused on networking and creating relationships and diving into those relationships, fully committing to developing relationships with your community. And I spent a large amount of money on a couple of marketing ideas that didn't really work out that well. And it wasn't. I learned from that. I spent the money on it. We spent the money on it. But what I really learned from that was, okay, this business for me is all about creating connection. It's all about having those relationships, which is why I love what you're doing with Turn, which is why it's so important to me, because when you have especially a young student, like, they need to know what their network is and how to develop a network. They need to understand the importance of interpersonal communication and relationships. And so I would say that big mistake for me was not recognizing that was where I should be investing my money and my time, and not in other ways, SEO and in digital marketing campaigns. And, for some businesses that stuff might be successful, but for us, it didn't pan out.
All right. So you've gone through your mess ups, you've gone through your processes, you've recovered from that. I love the interpersonal because obviously I'm all about the interpersonal, and we want to connect people in that way. So talk to us now about going back to the students, because you're a mentor to your patients. So what about students who are like, hey, I'm looking to be mentored. I want to go out there and I want to talk to my coach, my professor, this person that I met who I really admire. What kind of respectful, effective way would you say you can get into an interpersonal conversation for these students? How would you go about doing it?
Yeah, I think that's a really awesome question. I think, first of all, number one is to talk to you guys at Turn. That's going to be the thing that they got to do. No, but seriously, I think I might simplify it, but this is just kind of my personality, I guess. But if you see somebody in your community that you're like, hey, this could be a really great opportunity for me to learn from them, or, all those parameters that you just kind of set forward, go up to them and talk to them. Like, don't be afraid. I think sometimes students might be intimidated that an adult in their field doesn't want to talk to you, or, there could be some level of intimidation there. I think it couldn't be farther from the truth. I've had people that have come up to me as a 19-year-old, still in college, and they say, hey, I see what you're doing. I would love to learn from you. I'm going to be graduating school in a couple of years. I'd love to follow up with you once I've graduated. I'm like, heck yeah, that's awesome. I think most people in their field, when they see a young person that is first of all, has the guts enough to go up to you and say, hey, nice to meet you. I'm so and so. I'm really interested in learning from you if there's any sort of opportunity. I mean, that to me tells me everything I need to know about that student and that they got the right stuff in them. So I would say don't be afraid. Just go ask them, go talk to them, find a way to approach them. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to get their email. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to get their phone number, get their clinic number, get their business number. But I think at the end of the day, you gotta assert yourself. You got to assert yourself, and you got to go find that opportunity for yourself. And again, this is why I love what you're doing with Turn, but those opportunities to shadow and to learn from a mentor and to see things in the field, when you're a student, I mean, frankly, you don't know what you know. You don't know anything. You don't know if you know, it's funny. I said I wanted to go into chiropractic, sports chiropractic, because I saw it personally. It happened to me. I saw exactly what it was like. I said, wow, I could totally see myself doing this. I loved it. I did an internship in my curriculum in my undergrad degree where I got to go shadow an orthopedic surgeon for a long time. And I was like, wow, this is really awesome. I love this. I could do this. But if you're a student and you're not investing into those things, you have no idea. Like, you have no idea what you do and don't know. You don't know if you're going to like it. You don't know if you're going to love it. I mean, you could hate it. So I think the best thing to do is be assertive. Go talk to them. Go ask them. There's nothing wrong with approaching a professional and saying to them, hey, I'm Johnny, and I'd love to learn from you if it's possible. Let me know if there's a day potentially I could come shadow you. I would love.
What about? I love that, and that's what I tend to do, because I like you enjoy connecting with people.
We're the same, yeah.
But what about, we've got this wonderful wide world of the interweb, and YouTube is fantastic and teaching us so many things. And there is masterclass this and masterclass that. So what would you advise to people, as far as the balance between the interpersonal versus dude, you can just look that up, just Google it. Just look it up, and you can figure it out online. You don't even have to talk to anybody.
Yeah, sure. I think the questions, speaking specifically to my field, I think the questions that I want to be asked are similar things to what we're talking about today. Like, what made you want to get into this field? What traits do you think I, would need to perform and to excel in this field? What are certain skills that I should, try to develop now while I'm an undergrad or while I'm in grad? Like, what are the certain things that you see that are skills that I should, because frankly, especially in our field, like, you're going to get educated. It's not my job to teach you all that. You're going to go through that. If you're going to get to where I am now, you have to go through all those hoops. You got to take all your board exams. There's like countless hours and hours of studying that you have to do. So no doctor, frankly, wants to like teach you the basics of organic chemistry, and go over, no one wants to really do that, if I'm being honest with you. But what we do want to show you is like the skills and the personality traits and the mindset that it takes to be successful. And I think that would probably bleed into most fields, especially fields that require, advanced education to get into. But yeah, those questions to me are the good questions. Like what, all those personality skills and traits and things that you need. And you're going to learn how to deliver an adjustment. You're going to learn how to do a side posture of A to P, P to A. I'm talking in medical terms now, but you're going to learn all that stuff. But what you're not going to know unless you talk to a professional in the field is all of the other skills and personality traits and all those things that you need to be successful.
So for the current student, specifically the student athlete, since where you hail from as well, listening to this podcast, they might be terrified about what happens after? Like, what happens after college? And let's say I'm in a major right now where I found it interesting, but I don't know if that's going to be my career pursuit. I'm not going to go pro, semi-pro, I am so freaked out about what is going to happen after. What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's a good, this is my favorite one so far. So I would say, I went through this big time. I think that athletes, when you go through a collegiate athletic experience and you're divulging so much of your time in your life into your sport, and then one day it's done and it's over and you don't have that anymore in your life, it almost feels like you're breaking up, like you're going through a really tragic loss. At least that's how it felt to me. And so I went through a pretty big moment of, I would say, almost depression, where I was like, what am I, this huge part of my life is now gone. For me in college, we were lifting weights and training and doing off-season programming. I mean, I don't think I took more than a whole week off for 5 years. I mean, you're just constantly training. So to all of a sudden then just be like, okay, you're done with this now, and now you get to go into the professional world, it was definitely a challenge. So I would say the advice that I would have is, if you're an athlete or student athlete out there and your career is coming to an end, like, those emotions are real. You don't have to like try to suppress them. Like, it is what it is. It's okay to feel like you've suffered a little bit of a loss, because it's a huge part of your life. You know, I still love football. I still have dreams about playing, and I wake up before I can get on the field. Like, I wish that I could still play. But you just accept that those emotions are real. It is what it is. It's okay to feel like you lost like a connection to something, but also don't be afraid of it. Like, it's okay. It's just a part of evolution of life. And what I would encourage people to do is to take all those skills and everything that we talked about today that you learned, and just position them into whatever it is that you want to do next. And take your time to pick. And you don't have to rush. You know, figure out what you want to do. If you want to go to be a chiropractor, great. If you're like, you know what, I might need to do something else and take a little bit of time to figure out what's next, that's fine too. But don't ever lose those skills that you learned, because you just spent so much time developing all those skills that we already discussed. You know, the experience, the hard work, the discipline, the mental fortitude that it takes to be a student athlete, that's still in there. So don't let that go. But it's okay to just recognize that those emotions are real, go through that. And then when you're ready, focus on what you got to do next. That to me is what I wish somebody would have said to me. And it would have maybe taken me a little less time to just come to because I think there's a denial phase. I think I went through, I'm like, I remember thinking like, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I not as motivated? And I remember thinking to myself, like, it's not about football. I know it's like, I'm more than just a football player. I am more than just a football player. But when you spend so much of your time focusing on that one thing, it really was like an emotional moment to like say goodbye to that, you know? So I think that's the biggest piece of advice I could give is accept those emotions. It's okay. It's going to feel sometimes like you had a little bit of a loss, but take your time, figure out what you want to do next, and then take all those skills and plow forward, and you're going to be a lot better off for what you went through.
Well, that was so raw and so vulnerable. And I just want to say thank you for that, because I think that that's going to resonate with a lot of people who are listening, particularly that student athlete. So I got to squeeze out one last bit of advice, because here you are today. So you are definitely more than an athlete. I did not meet you as an athlete. I am so grateful to have you in my life as a chiropractor. Like I said, I break myself quite often, it seems like. So if you could write a short note to your younger athletic self and leave it on your locker room before a big game, what would that note say to the younger future Dr. Josh Angulo?
Yeah, I would say the note would be probably quite simple and plain, but I would write something along the lines of, trust yourself, don't be afraid to make decisions and choices, and have fun. Like, that's what I would say. I spent so much time in my career as an athlete training countless hours. And then especially with football, you only get like 14 games, at least we did at the time. You only get 14 chances to display it each season, but that's if you look at it like you're only a football player. You're actually learning all these skills for the rest of your life, and you get to apply it every single day. So that to me is what I would say.
Awesome. Well, you display your excellence more than in 14 games. Every single day you're out there making people feel better, not just physically, but like you said, you are tied to that interpersonal, emotional connection as well. That's what makes you so special to me. And I want to say thank you so much for joining today's Turn Talks. For anybody who's interested, you can find Dr. Josh Angulo at Optimum Wellness. Again, he and his team are in the DMV area. For those of you who are not familiar with DMV, this is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. You can also check them out at optimumwellness.com. We're going to have everything in the chat after our call. And I just want to say thank you again, Dr. Josh. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thanks for having me, Tina. This is super fun.
Awesome. Well, have a great day out there, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Turn Talks. To learn more about our robust mentoring platform, visit us at turnmentoring.com. Join us next time for more enlightening conversations.